Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to KPMG's Isle of Man webinar series. I hope you can all hear me fine this morning. My name is Russell Kelly, and I'm the Senior Partner here at KPMG Isle of Man. I hope that you have enjoyed the series so far. When we put our first one on a month ago now, we couldn't have predicted where we would be in a month's time, both globally and locally. But as the weeks have progressed, we are starting to see a clearer picture, and it is encouraging to see countries starting to plan for the easing of lockdown, where it is considered safe to do so. However, what does look certain is that normal will be very different from what we have known to date. Just a quick reminder that if at any time you feel that you're losing us connection-wise, you'll see a reconnect button at the top, and that will refresh you back into the webinar live room. As always, if you have any questions, either during or after the webinar, please email them to webinars@kpmg.co.im. So on to today's webinar. The focus of today's webinar is on the support measures that have been made available in the Isle of Man, and I'm delighted to say that we have with us today two guest presenters. Firstly, Minister Skelly from the Department for Enterprise, and then Basil Bielich from the Manx Solidarity Fund. I will also be joined today by colleagues Simon Nicholas, a fellow partner with KPMG Isle of Man, and Kristen King, a director in our advisory team. The Isle of Man government support schemes are now live, and the latest figures as of Monday detail that there have been over 3,500 applications. The Chamber of Commerce have also recently launched their own support scheme, and Chamber have undertaken a number of weekly surveys now, and the general trend is that a number of businesses are showing significant concern about furloughing staff and over their future cash flow outlook. Thus far, our webinar series has looked at some of the details around cash flow forecasting and managing your stakeholders at a time of crisis for your business, with a very high-level overview of the support schemes available. Today, we plan to shift the focus to look at the support schemes in more detail and have Minister Skelly provide a little more insight into the schemes and what DFE are seeing in terms of applications. Simon will interview Minister Skelly, and then Kristen will set out some practical tips on the application process in terms of business plan preparation and other aspects, before we hear from Basil, who will tell us more about the progress of the Manx Solidarity Fund and how to access the support it offers. So, before we start with the detail, in terms of a very high-level general update, we have seen some easing of restrictions locally, with construction and gardeners returning to work last week. And overall, there is a slightly busier feel to the island if you are out and about. However, the majority of businesses remain closed or are working from home at this time. As we will hear from the Minister, there has been a strong take-up of the schemes that have been offered, and the government are currently underwriting loans of up to £60 million with the local banking sector. And the Treasury Minister stated yesterday in his conference call that the Tynwald will be asked to approve up to £250 million of government borrowing at this time. Looking further afield to the UK, economic data is still gloomy, with markets still down around 25% from mid-February levels, and there does not yet seem to be a firm plan for restarting the economy, which is adding to uncertainty. With that, I'll now hand over to Simon and Minister Skelly.
So thanks very much, Russell. It's great to be here today, and in particular, we've got a very special guest, the Minister Skelly, who is with us. And thank you very much for spending the time to be with us today. I appreciate that your time is very, very busy and it's challenging times for you.
Yes, well, can I first of all say, Fasta Mai, Raina Sarah, good afternoon, or what will be more of my Raina Sarah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, in the live webinar. So delighted to be here and participate with this. Whilst this is actually being recorded, we've just had a Tynwald sitting, moving more emergency legislation, which quite a lot of that was in help and support for the business community of the Isle of Man. So very delighted to be here, Simon.
Unprecedented times, don't you think? I mean, it's I think many of our clients are seeing this almost as great a challenge, more so than the financial crisis.
Yes, yes. I think that seems like 2-3 weeks ago somebody said that the financial crisis and 9/11 combined, this is much bigger, much greater, and clearly the impact is going to be felt for many years. So yes, these are unprecedented times, certainly living memory.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, your department and Treasury have been very quick to respond with various different measures. I wonder if you could talk us through some of those at a high level. Obviously, we've all had a couple of weeks and to digest them, but it'd be great to hear directly from you.
Yes, thank you, Simon. I mean, what we tried to do, and I think we immediately understood that cash was going to be a problem, and we needed to put together a series of different measures because it was going to affect businesses, it was going to affect workers, and what we tried to do is put together a series of different schemes which were launched at different times depending on when we could actually get them up and running and the legislation in place. But they're all up and running now, I'm glad to say, and they are actually got their applications pouring in. And but I would like to also say that we have dealt with the vast majority, certainly in our department's case, the business support scheme, which has seen, I think, over 3,000 applications at one particular time. But I know we've, in that case, I think £6 million has actually been approved and out the door, which I'm glad to say. So that is all about getting cash in the hands. Over on Treasury side, the salary support schemes, the MIRA scheme, I think there's sort of 1,200, should I say, applications that have actually been paid to date. And then there's the loan guarantees, the strategic capacity, etc. That have a number of applications being processed as we speak. So both teams in Enterprise and Treasury have been working together 7 days a week ever since we've actually launched this to try and get that support out as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, and on behalf of the business community, that effort is recognised, and we do genuinely thank you for it. I know it's 7 days a week. We got together on that Sunday before some of those announcements. So yes, I know it's no one's watching the clock on this one. I mean, what's feedback been like around the schemes? Do businesses feel they're working? What are you hearing?
I think the vast majority is yes. However, as always with government, it does take time to put them into effect, and part of that is moving legislation, for example. But we would also recognise that they weren't perfect, and whilst they tried to capture the vast majority of businesses that were affected, that we could identify, what became very apparent very quickly is that this is so widespread and the impact is so broad that we've had to make these amendments and these changes, and that's exactly what we've done this afternoon again in Tynwald, move more legislation in support to try and capture those all sectors that have been affected. But in many ways, though, Simon, just taking a step back and reflecting, it's also demonstrated how diverse our economy actually is. So we talk about 24 different sectors, and of course we have 4 different business executive agencies that are really focused in certain parts of the economy. The diversity is really significant, and that's through this process. But I think overall we are getting certainly to the vast majority, and the cases that we're dealing with now at this stage are some of the ones that do have a number of issues that we do need to delve into and try and resolve.
Yeah. And it has been an ever-evolving situation. We've seen our neighbour in the UK; they're constantly evolving their schemes in exactly the same way. And certainly, I know that many of our clients appreciate that whilst those more obviously impacted sectors like tourism and hospitality were first on the list, that actually the government has broadened that to others that are affected, recognising, if you take my sector, there are accountants who've unfortunately been made redundant because their client bases were almost predominantly shopkeepers and builders and the like. So I know the business community has appreciated that being broadened.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Simon. And I'd also like to say thank you actually to the business community, the Chamber of Commerce, and I think your own company and other companies have stepped up to the mark. You know, the business advisory service that has been offered there is extremely welcomed, I have to say. And you know, so that I know personal people have called me and said I wasn't aware of it, and they're absolutely delighted that it is available. So we should highlight that even more so. And I think something we touched offline before you started about business plans, because of course, you know, lots of big businesses have a lot of business plans, they have business continuity, but clearly lots and lots of small businesses, they probably didn't and recognise that that's something they have to consider. So we're going through sort of a real rapid change, you know, in terms of economic terms. And, you know, I think in many ways it allows people to be really focused now to understand, you know, how can they adjust very quickly, and where can they see benefits, because we're moving into a slightly different area here. But it became very apparent fairly quickly that there are opportunities that will be born out of this, and we need to adapt as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I'm always a half full kind of guy, and there are benefits that are coming out of this, that you can see that businesses are moving on technology in a greater way. We can also see you know, post this crisis, that lots of businesses will be looking at the way they process things and how they set themselves up. Something I know that's close to your heart is buying local. You know, I think some of the supply chains being the other side of the planet has been a real struggle for some businesses. Are you seeing those sorts of things as well?
Yes. I mean, that sort of comes out of it, doesn't it? You know, when you're in this crisis management mode, you got that sort of togetherness, I guess, you know, to begin with, and you know, as the shock sort of settles in, and then you've got to put the plan together in terms of, you know, how do you deal with that, and then you've got to start thinking about when you come out the other side, the recovery and the exit, which is kind of where we are right now. But you mentioned buying local. Yes, that is absolutely vital, and I think people on the Isle of Man have always been very conscious of that, but it's never been more important than ever. Because as we look towards the sort of exit and recovery, Simon, you think about every pound that's actually spent. You know, what's important is that pound stays on the island, and it moves into what you call the multiplier effect, which you'll be very, very familiar with, and that opportunity to spend that around. But if I might just go back a moment, when I talked about opportunities there, it's well worth highlighting particularly our engineering sector on the Isle of Man, which is a very large sector on the Isle of Man. It employs, I think, over 3,000 people. They very, very quickly adapted to the medical supply chain and the desperate need in terms of global demand there. And you've got some great success stories of those businesses that carried on working, I might say, right the way through, adapted very quickly, and are a real bonus, you know, for the Isle of Man, and also a source of pride, I would suggest too.
Yeah, and you know, we've seen you know, some of our favourite restaurants become doing takeaway and delivery services. What other sort of innovation have you seen in the industry? You mentioned engineers. Any others that you'd note?
I mean, yes, that is in one space, and Michael will be able to elaborate on this later. You know, that there's a couple of sectors are already, you know, looking at you know, what those opportunities might be, and you know, we're very strong in your space. I think the financial space. We always have been on the Isle of Man for many decades, but with digital, and we've seen a lot of that already, haven't we? With fintech, blockchain, and you know, and you know, there's a lot of new areas there that we're looking at as well, because we see what we've got to recognise as we do come out of this, beyond the immediate crisis which we're dealing with, is what is that economy going to look like? Because it's going to be it always was a competitive world, we know that, but it's going to be ever so more so. And this will, I think, give us an opportunity as a small jurisdiction where we are nimble, we can change legislation, we can be competitive and get ourselves and steal the march. And that's where, not for us as government to decide where the next big thing is, for you and the industry to tell us what do we need to do. And those work streams are already started.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. Certainly, the way the economy bounces back is almost just as important as how it survives it. And like you, I do believe there are opportunities. So we should try and remain positive. I mean, obviously, not all companies can be positive at the moment. Some of them are having really tough times. Are there any consistent themes that you've seen in those that, you're a politician, so you're very used to, sadly, only hearing probably more about the negatives than the positives. But those that have been negative about the schemes, is there any consistent themes or complications that you're seeing?
I think all I would say is there were a few that were definitely missed, and we didn't quite grasp some of those sectors that might have been impacted. But hopefully what you've heard is what we tried to get over, and both in my space as Minister for Enterprise and Treasury Minister, Al Cannon, has said that tell us about them and we will try and fix them, because if you are affected, we need to know about it, and we need to find an appropriate level of support for you and your employment. And I think that was one of the things that came out very quickly, was that, yes, cash was king, cash flow was critical for so many industries. What we wanted to do is also recognise the skills issue. As you know, just pre this, we were on a trajectory there with regards to locating. We have more jobs than we had people. We need more people here. So the skills is going to be really, really important, I think, coming out this, because some of those sectors, particularly take the tourism and hospitality areas, which may be some of the last sectors to kind of come out of this, will need to understand, what kind of skills they could be retrained in. You mentioned about adapting just to the immediate, demand and criteria, but we need to think about ongoing skills that's going to be needed. And I a lot of people have been pointing to Germany, where they've always been in this particular area in the vocational space. And we've been making significant strides in that area, but I think it's going to come out even stronger, that the importance of those skills.
Yeah, and I think it'll be of interest to the attendees today, and to you. I don't think we've spoken about this, but we've been tracking the data on our website actually over the crisis, and of course our COVID response pages have been very busy, and that's been fantastic that we can reach out to those people. But interestingly, the second most popular page is actually from overseas people looking about how they moved to the Isle of Man and how you set up in the Isle of Man. So I think actually this is changing the world forever, and there is an opportunity for the island.
No, you're right, and that'll come out of it at the other end. And I think it's quite interesting. I read a couple of articles on where New Zealand's positioning themselves, and clearly we got some similarities there in all sorts of reasons, weather and, being sort of an innovative nation too, very big with their nature and biosphere, one of our USPs. But I think, in terms of how they've dealt with this crisis, we've sort of followed the border closure, which was a tough decision, but clearly was a real benefit to us to where we are today. The level of testing that we've done, the contact tracing that we've done, the commitment that we made early doors to source our own PPE to give confidence to our medics and that profession, that we're taking this serious and we're going to deal with this. But coming out of that, it says, hang on a minute, that's demonstrated you as an island can make really positive, well, sometimes difficult decisions, but in the interest of your island. So therefore, if your business is located on this island, you want to grow on this island, and you want to develop and be profitable on this island, we can hopefully say the same there for the business environment too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've publicly said already, the most important tool the Isle of Man had was its borders. So I think closing those was absolutely the right decision. And again, actually, if you look at silver lining, I think we'll all be looking at the way we've previously used to use corporate travel And again, now we can adopt technology, and did we really need to do as many of those trips as we did, which of course impacts the environment, not just our profits.
That's a great point there, Simon, because of course just before this there was a big debate with regards to the climate change, and we were working on a climate change bill, and there was 50 action points that came out of that, and one of them, which I was very strong on myself, and that was mobile working, and it fit well with clearly with climate change, and we had early discussions about how much of government could be mobile working. And we thought we were ambitious when we were talking about 20% within 12 months. Well, I would suggest to you that we probably got the reverse of that within 1 month, and it just demonstrated again, when the back's against the wall, we can achieve. So the climate change, I think, will come out of it, and people will be asking those questions about, do I really need to travel, whether it be off island or even for us into Douglas? Do we need all that parking and office space? So those are questions that will come out of this quite naturally.
Yeah, and flexible working is a key one. There's work-life balance benefits and everything else. And I think there's lots of our clients that we've spoken to previously said, no, we just couldn't get it to work. It just won't work for us. And consistently, every single one of them is now saying, yeah, we need to have a rethink on that and rethink the way that we work, which could be positive again for the island.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say the irony of that is it goes back to exactly what we've said as a programme with government. The Isle of Man is a special place to live and work. So as you're into this mobile working, and we talked offline there, for me and Michael and Dina, there's up to 8 hours being saved actually as a result of this mobile working. So that's 8 hours maybe can be productive, maybe for some of those hours or all of them, or those 8 hours could be enjoying what we have outdoors and the Isle of Man that we all appreciate.
Yeah.
So
and how has the island's infrastructure stood up, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Simon, because we in our space had the responsibility and lead for the National Broadband Plan, and we had just before coronavirus arrived, about to announce a major contract in terms of rollout to ultra-fast broadband to the cabinet around the entire island in terms of an accelerated program. So that had to be put on hold. Why? Because what we currently had, as we all adjusted to this new working environment and the demand, particularly on the technology that we had, the critical infrastructure had to be supported as a primary. And but I will say that we're still committed to a rollout of ultra-fast broadband across the island, and something we already agreed, and people have probably forgotten now, is we have increased resilience with our cables coming in and out of the island, which we just signed up to just late last year. So we have various components that have actually benefited already in the National Broadband Plan. So critical infrastructure being really important, and let's not forget the steam packet. That's a critical piece of infrastructure, and at the time it was quite bold for us to make that commitment as a government to buy it. But look, if we didn't own that steam packet, just think of what position we might be in right now.
No, absolutely. I mean, this week we've just to move on slightly. We obviously seen construction start to return to work. Many of our clients will be from all sorts of industries actually, but I guess it's probably more services more generally, be it financial services or gaming or other sectors. What's your thoughts about returning to work strategies, and particularly the service industry?
No, good point. Well, we always said that we would do it as a phased approach, and what we've done here is do bear in mind that we departed from the UK government with regards to policies, around the border control, was the big one, which we just touched on earlier. But the other one was we made a pretty firm decision with regards to closing down that industry as well as horticulture. And whilst the UK, continued as did other jurisdictions, but this was all about us trying to get real control and contain and suppress this virus effectively. And then you'll recognise this about the data that's been really important. And by making that decision and gathering that data, we believe that we come out of this cautiously optimistic that we are suppressing it, we are containing it, and the results for the last 4 days will tell you that. And that's all about making decisions based on evidence effectively. And the construction industry, which is 4,500 people, including the horticultural sectors, will be a real important boost. We can talk a lot about the health crisis, but this is an economic crisis as well. Right. So they will be a boost to our economy. And then we have to have at least 8 days before we do the next measurement. And therefore, we said every 2 weeks we will be looking at another phased introduction, assuming that the medical information remains positive and consistent. So non-essential shops is the next one. Behind that becomes hospitality and lifestyle and tourism and bars. Will come behind that again. So it's all about a step phase approach, and it is and very, very importantly backed by our clinical leadership team who we've been following all the way along.
No, and thank you for that plan. I mean, obviously the Chief Minister communicated that today, and quite clearly so. I mean, it's feedback I've given you through the FS Agency Board anyway, but certainly the CEOs and of the large employers we continue to talk to are all in no major rush to have their staff return to the office. As I say, with the borders shut, we've got a great tool there to just quash this once and for all. There will be some people attending this webinar today who are desperate to get back in because they struggle to function, and I think policy should allow for them to do that in a safe way. But certainly some of the large employers are in no rush because in part because the technology has worked well.
And I think everyone's got to, we're living in at very least a period of severe, trepidation, really, isn't it? And you only got to go for a walk or go to, do your essential shopping, and you get a reaction from people. And the Manx public have been brilliant, absolutely outstanding in terms of how they've managed to change their social behaviours very, very quickly. So as we make these changes of a phased return to some form of normality, we've got to do it in the right order. But what we're working on now, Simon, and we're hoping to publish by end of this week, all being well, and that is a strategy document about this phased approach. Chief Minister talked about six phases there, but we might condense that a little more closely. And when we publish that, which is, I think, being finalised on Thursday with Council of Ministers, and hopefully be published by end of week, all being well.
Great, and I'm sure many of the people attending this today will be keen to read that and see when they can start to get back to some level of normality. If I could just sort of start to wrap up, and we touched about economic recovery. Are there any particular plans in place at government around how to respond when we can get back to normal, to make the most of this?
A little early in terms of what those plans are going to be, and what I would say is we've just kicked off those work streams. So you and everyone, others will have an opportunity to feed into that now, because we've got to start looking at that, and that's why this strategy document is really important. Obviously, being focused on the immediate crisis, and now we're at a point where we've gone beyond that now. We need to now look at the recovery and the exit on this. So I think we're at a better place. We cannot be complacent from a health perspective, but we're trying to now bring in, shall we say, not just the economics of it, because there's a society issue here too that we must think about, because you can't stay in that lockdown environment forever. you've got to be able to come out at some stage. So not just to work, but just to integrate again and get back to some form of normality. So there is a big price there in terms of that society that we have to think about as well at the same time.
No, absolutely. Minister, thank you so much for your time. Are there any sort of final messages you want to give to the business community?
Well, I just would like to say thank you, because it's recognised many of you continue to work, and you continue to work, therefore you're continuing to pay taxes, and that has been really valued. But I also would say to you, do use your Manx spirit. Your Manx spirit, you've been resilient. There's no doubt about that. But you've also are very, very innovative. And now is the time for us to look afresh and say, hey, where are those areas that we can take advantage as an island, as an economy, as a community, and let's come out of this stronger than when we did. It will be a long haul. Let's recognise that, but we as a government, we're here with you in that long haul. So thank you very much, Simon, and thank you everyone for attending today. Really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you all in person. So in the Manx, we say Tani Sushi. Stay safe.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm pleased we could finish on a positive note. Once again, many thanks to the Minister for giving us his time yesterday afternoon, straight out of Tynwald, to talk to us. The Minister touched on the government support that's available. He also touched on the private sector support that's also out there. One thing that we've done is release today our resource hub, which really just tries to pull everything into one place. There are 3 key sections. The Isle of Man government section, which includes a booklet by us on the interpretation of the schemes, also a checklist for the applications and things that you should be thinking about, and certainly Kristen in the next section is going to go through that in a bit more detail based on the feedback that we've been getting to date. And the second section is around the KPMG resources that we've made available. Some of those have already been sent out on social media, but what feedback we were getting was there's so much out there. It'd be really helpful if we could all have it in one place. So it includes the playbacks of our webinars, the thought leadership, some tips on cash flow, remote working tips, security considerations, how to account for grants, a whole wealth of KPMG resources there. And then the third section is if you're not sure where else to get support. We've got details of the other support services that are out there, be it Chamber, the Institute of Directors, of course, DEFI themselves, and others. So there really is no excuse for not getting help at this time if you really, really need it. And I'd now just like to hand over to Kristen, who will run you through some practical examples of how to make your applications better.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Kristen King from the KPMG advisory team, and just like to build on some of the themes that we've discussed on our previous webinars and highlight their relevance when trying to access some of the government support schemes. We've just called this section sort of riding the waves, and I think now that we're 5 or 6 weeks into the lockdown period in the Isle of Man, we're fortunate enough to be seeing some of the sectors returning to work where safe to do so. And although some of your businesses will have been affected for longer, where you have suppliers or customers in overseas markets that closed down earlier than here, you're hopefully coming towards the end of what might be considered to be wave 1, which was basically focused on initial survival, certainly in some cases. So by now, I'm sure you will have all taken the immediate actions that were required to protect your business as best as you could. These will have included obviously communicating with your clients and suppliers to estimate the extent of potential impact on sales, projecting your cash position and calculating the level of staff cost and other overheads that your business can bear in light of your expected sales levels, making sure people could work effectively from home where possible. We've just heard Minister Skelly and Simon discussing that, and it seems to have been a success, certainly for many businesses in the sort of professional services sector. And in relation to government support, you may have been investigating applications for the wage support scheme where you've had to furlough some of your staff. also the business support scheme, and where applicable, deferring any VAT payments that may have fallen due. But as the dust settles and we come to think of this last couple of months as wave 1, you should now be working out really what wave 2, operating under restricted practices, and wave 3, a subsequent period of recovery once restrictions are lifted, will look like for your business, with the hope that wave 4 might even be when business starts to return to something previously considered normal. There is some caution though. I can't guarantee there will only be 4 waves. We've all spilt our drinks on the Ben McCree before when we've been caught out by an unexpected wave, and that could well happen now. Different businesses will also experience difficulties at different times. As with the beach, the wave breaks first at one end and takes time to work its way along. So there may be financial services or professional services businesses, for example, that we know that have been relatively unaffected so far, due to the billing of Q1 activity at the end of March and fulfilling the remainder of their Q1 pipeline during April. But these businesses may feel the greatest impact actually during wave 2, as they've been unable to build new pipeline during March and April, and as their clients may potentially take more time to settle the invoices raised in March. So I just want to touch today on some of the key wave 2 activities. Firstly, what do we mean by wave 2? Well, I think it's a period that whilst we will still have restrictions on working or trading, either locally or internationally, but these restrictions are gradually lifted. We heard from the Chief Minister yesterday that there's a 6-stage plan for the lifting of restrictions in the Isle of Man to be announced at the end of this week. And Minister Skelly just touched on it as well. Although this as yet can't include a schedule of when each stage will be implemented. Again, many of your businesses will also be dependent on restrictions being lifted in other countries, which equally may not have indicated, almost certainly won't have indicated, timing for lifting of those restrictions. So the key actions for phase 2 consist of reassessing your short-term and cash trading and cash flow forecasts, considering carefully what may be achievable during wave 2 and putting action plans in place to see you through it and hopefully position your business for wave 3 and beyond. So it's really about reassessment of your short-term, weekly trading and cash flow forecasts that we've covered in some of the earlier webinars. And these should now be informed by the experience that you've had over the last 4 to 6 weeks, where you'll at least started to have gathered some data to inform your view what level of trading is possible whilst the restrictions are in place, and the likely level of cash inflows and outflows. These should form the basis of your forecasts, not your old trading as normal budget with a few amendments. So wave 2 still carries considerable uncertainty, and the schedule for lifting of restrictions is fluid. So even as restrictions are removed, you won't be certain how suppliers and clients will respond. So you need to keep your communication open with them. And caution and prudence are going to be key when reforecasting as you go through this period. So for some of you, you may have delayed putting your staff onto the wage support scheme in the hope that COVID-19 impact would be short or wouldn't significantly affect you. But this you may now need to apply if your business is going to be one of those that's more badly affected during wave 2. And the current wage support scheme is running until the 25th of May. We do recognise that this scheme and the business support scheme do have eligibility criteria relating to the sectors that your business is operating in. There will be some businesses that have been affected that perhaps don't meet the eligibility criteria. But in these cases, I would urge you to still contact the DFE directly or through a relevant trade body or through ourselves to perhaps try to highlight some of the issues that your business or sector is facing. Hopefully, though, for many of you, you will have survived wave 1 and be expecting difficult but survivable trading through wave 2. A little bit like the trip on the Ben McCree. So gradual recovery during wave 3 will then hopefully follow, and a successful future in the long term when we get to wave 4. So as a result, you might now be considering how to access additional funding that will make sure you get through the rougher patches of wave 2. So when you're looking to access finance, some of the most likely sources of additional finance to get you through the tight spots and perhaps into wave 3 are likely to be, as you'd expect, existing shareholders, perhaps for smaller businesses, family or friends, bank overdrafts and loans. And in relation to the government schemes, I think those that are going to be primarily important are going to be the disruption loan guarantee scheme. So this is where the government were guaranteeing 80% of £60 million of loan funding to be provided by a selection of the local banks, and that will be provided to businesses that don't meet their normal lending criteria. The coronavirus business adaptation scheme will also be important. This is where government may provide a proportion of the funding required to adapt your business to deliver new services or reach new markets. This scheme focuses on primary sectors that are export earning and generating employment, but will also consider those in the secondary sectors. The funding available does vary by sector, and so the scheme guidelines should be read carefully. But the advantage of this scheme is that it will consider application from new businesses seeking to establish themselves in the Isle of Man, as well as existing businesses that are already here. And then finally, we've got the Strategic Investment Fund, where full guidelines and application process have yet to be published on the DfE COVID-19 webpage. But it's highlighted that as being appropriate for businesses with assets that may have a long-term capital value that could be acquired by the government to provide funding, but there may also be equity and loan funding available. One common theme for all of the above is going to be the need to demonstrate that your business is viable in the long term, and in the case of loans, could reasonably be expected to repay the debt. You're going to need to do some research to assess whether your business could meet the eligibility criteria for any of the sources of finance above, be they the lending banks or government support schemes. And you're going to need to consider whether you have any security that you could give against debt finance that may be beneficial to your application. A key thing to remember, and something that we often find people forget, is that you're going to need to educate a third party about your business. They're not going to have the understanding or insight into it that you have. So the process can be a little bit frustrating, but you do need to try to remember that, and remember that these people are having to take commercial decisions about whether you'll be able to repay the debt or whether your business, quite frankly, deserves the finance ahead of another business. So make it as easy as you can for them to accept your application. So in order to do this, you're going to need a business plan that describes your business, how it operates, and this will need to be supported by financial forecasts that is consistent with the business plan. We don't have time to go through all of the contents of a business plan in detail today, but we've set out a few key points that must be covered, and I've split these into the qualitative and the quantitative aspects. So just firstly, I'd say remember that, as I've mentioned, the person processing your business doesn't know quite how brilliant it is. You're going to need to educate them quickly. They're going to need to know the services that you offer, how your services differentiate from competitors, in which markets you operate and how you access them, which customers you're serving, how you price your product or service, whether sales are contracted or not, the macro factors that are going to influence the size of your market in the short and medium term. They're going to need to understand the supply chain for your product and service, how that's going to recover from COVID-19, and whether you operate within a regulated environment and how you comply. People will also need to know about the people that make your business tick and any intellectual property that might exist. So you're also going to need to include CVs for your key staff members and provide a good history of the business, describing how it was initially founded, what the key milestones are that it's achieved, and what makes it unique. Also provide details of any specific processes or product designs, intellectual property that you may hold, whether that be patented or not. It can be very easy to forget some of these qualitative factors. As I say, these are the elements that you tend to know about instinctively, but need explaining to a third party. On the quantitative factors, you're going to need to look at your historical performance, and you're going to need to provide a cash flow statement, statutory accounts. Honestly, when we're doing due diligence on businesses and trying to understand how they operate commercially, statutory accounts are very rarely insightful enough. So you're going to need to think about whether you've got historical management accounts that you can present, whether you can provide monthly trends in trading and cash position historically. And you should include narrative describing the trends in performance over a 2 to 3 year period, and actually provide the reasons for those trends as well, so that people can understand how the factors that are changing in your sector are impacting your financials. and how actions that the business has taken have impacted or benefited the financials as well. You should be looking at your operational key KPIs that can be provided alongside your historical financials so that the drivers of performance are clearly understood. This might be the number of units of a product you've sold in a period, the average selling price, or it might be the number of hours you've charged your clients and the hourly rate achieved. And you should also be providing details of the number of employees or average cost of sales per unit so that your cost base can be understood. Anyone considering an application for finance is going to be assessing your forecasts. They're going to want to know what the factors are that influence your financial performance and how your cost base changes as sales fluctuate upwards or downwards. And you're obviously going to need to provide a financial forecast. This is going to have to incorporate a P&L, a balance sheet, and a cash flow covering the next 2 and ideally 3 years. This should, again, ideally be built upon forecast KPIs that drive an output, such as forecast sales levels. So again, building in something like projected number of sales, average price per sale, etc. Building a model in Excel is advisable, as most third parties are then able to interrogate the model and understand the key assumptions that underpin it. It's something that most people are fairly familiar with. Can be hard to find a balance between making your forecast detailed enough that it stands up to scrutiny without it becoming so detailed that nobody can follow it. So be careful and try to share it with somebody that you know first to get their feedback. They'll give you a nice independent opinion as to how good the forecast is, whether it can be followed. A key tip is to keep any assumptions on one tab of the model so they're easily visible and considered. Avoid hard coding numbers into your main financial statements. Each element should be driven by a formula that ultimately links back to an assumption. And keeping the model set up this way then allows you to change the assumptions and be able to instantly see how a change in one input impacts the overall forecast performance and hopefully washes through your P&L, your balance sheet, and your cash flow. This ability to run different scenarios in a period of uncertainty, such as the one we're currently in, is going to be incredibly important. When submitting an application, you need to keep your base case as realistic as possible, which at the moment probably means slightly cautious. Speaking to some of the lending banks, you'll be expected to model a scenario where there are restrictions on your business or a dampened demand for at least 6 months, probably longer for many sectors. I think these are some of the key areas to think about at the moment. We've only time to touch on some of them today, but please get in touch if you'd like to discuss this more. There are some materials available on our website, as Simon's already referred to. I hope that your businesses are surviving and stabilising as we enter wave 2. But for some of us, the impact of COVID-19 may not yet have been fully felt. So it's important that we all keep on top of our short-term cash forecasts whilst planning cautiously for the medium term. I'll just hand over now to Basil Bielich, who's going to take you through the Manx Solidarity Fund and how that's trying to help businesses at the moment. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to join this webinar. The Manx Solidarity Fund was established during March in response to difficulties brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. A group of local businessmen identified that Manx individuals and organisations would face difficult times over the next few months, and they would require support. 2 organisations were formed. The Manx Solidarity Fund to look after the financial support, and helpout.im, who are coordinating a database of individuals and organisations who are willing to donate their time and skills to help those in need. Impressively, the charity was formed within 1 week, with the help of a number of individuals and government organisations. A local trust lawyer, John Rimmer, drew up the trust deed. Peregrine Corporate Services provided the licensed fiduciary to act as trustees for the application to the Attorney General's office, and the charity was registered within 2 days. The company's registry then incorporated a new company to act as a designated corporate trustee. A number of individuals with different skills and experience were approached to act as directors to this trustee company, and we held our first trustees meeting on the 30th of March. We then opened a bank account with Barclays Bank, who completed their due diligence within 2 days. We obtained director and officer insurance for the trustees, and His Excellency Sir Richard Gosney, Lieutenant Governor of the Isle of Man, agreed to be patron. KPMG have agreed to be our auditors. We then designed and set up a website which went live within a week, and we commenced raising funds. The aim of the charity is to deliver much needed funds and support to causes and individuals on the island who have been affected by COVID-19. The Isle of Man government has acted swiftly to support the Manx community, and it is the aim of the Manx Solidarity Fund to assist those individuals and organisations who fall outside this government support. As we all know, the pandemic has not only affected the health of our community, but also our income, our schools, our businesses, and our economy as a whole. Many people and organisations are now facing social and financial hardship as a result. We have identified 3 areas that the funds will support: individuals, businesses, charities, and other organisations who will support those affected by COVID-19. The Manx Solidarity Fund's objective is to identify needs in the Manx community and allocate resources to alleviate those hardships. How are we doing this? The Manx Solidarity Fund has 5 areas we work in. Our fundraising team has been out in the Manx community and approached a number of individuals and organisations who have generously supported the Manx Solidarity Fund. We have a Just Giving page which makes it simple for individuals to donate. Companies and others are donating directly into our bank account. We also have a local payment processor, Much Better, who has set up an account for us, which makes it easy for those with an account with them to donate to the fund. To date, over £200,000 has been received by the fund. Additionally, we have a number of pledges from individuals who will fund specific requirements for equipment or services. In order to distribute those funds, we have to identify the needs in the community. We have an online application form on our website where individuals and organisations can apply for assistance, and this is proving very popular. We have a team who is going into the community and identifying areas where there is a need, as some people find it difficult to ask for help. This team is identifying the needs and then collecting the information required to process the allocations. To clarify, we are inviting applications for both grants and loans. Once these applications have been received, they will be assessed to ensure that the applications fall within the objectives of the trust. A recommendation will then be made to the trustee body as a whole, who will approve the applications. Although we have experienced trustees, we will not hesitate to approach outside parties to advise the trustees on the merits of applications. Once processed and approved by the trustees, we have a team that will then distribute funds to the applicants. Our marketing team sits alongside the other teams, and they are continually raising the profile of the Manx Solidarity Fund. We have received a number of applications from various areas, and which we have processed, and we are really pleased to be distributing funds into the community this week. It is early days of this crisis, and we envisage that we will start getting a lot more requests for assistance in the next few weeks. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Manx Solidarity Fund, but please do not hesitate to contact me or any of my colleagues if you require any further information. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's webinar, and thank you to my colleagues Simon and Kristen, but also to our guest speakers today, Minister Skelly and Basil Bielich, for taking time out of their busy schedules to contribute to our webinar today. As we mentioned at the start, all of our webinars and slides are available to rewatch by going to kpmg.co.im/webinars, and today's webinar will be up there later. Also, don't forget our resource hub that will be constantly updated with new resources as and when they become available. And please do reach out to any of the team if you'd like to discuss any aspects of our webinars or the support schemes with us. Future dates for your diary. Next week, we have our risk advisory team on the webinar covering risk through regulation, fraud and cyber at difficult times. And the following week, we have a tax update from our tax team. Finally, many thanks to all of you and to all of the attendees today, and please do stay safe. Thank you.